This episode was not brought to you by Doritos. And now a dramatic reading with Mr. Baron Von B. Bahamuts Frontier, Chapter 2. Clouds started drifting across the sky in small amounts, like herds of sheep in a field full of endless open spaces, giving momentary patches of shade through the tournament grounds. Crystal Latte transitioned her violet orbs from the sky to the arena as a new bunch of fighters were entering the rings. Standing at roughly 5 foot 5 inches, Crystal was of medium build, perhaps being more toned to her body overall than most girls her age and height, slightly tomboyish. That was thanks to her giant two-handed sword that gave her this blessing. Or that is what she kept telling herself, that it was a blessing. Her haircut was also shorter than that of the regular townsgirl, being about ear length. It was a purple color that seemed to move her hair while there was no breeze present. Covering her body was a sleeveless armored chest piece and armored leggings that cut off above her knees. She had bare legs below her knees, including her feet, which were often dirty and callous. Ting, clang, clink, swish, bang. The sounds of battle brought her out of a reverie, and seemed pretty heated already in 1 minute. To the untrained eye, it looked as if this battle was a show of intent to kill, and maybe it was. Crystal was having a hard time discerning the possibility too. The two combatants in the ring were two males, one seemingly older and taller than the other but lacked proper muscle toning and physical conditioning, and yet was holding his own against a smaller male who was matching this man's pacing. Maybe he was overworking the shorter male with his quick strikes and uncanny sword techniques. Ronix Jewel was having his hands full with this opponent. Being just the legal age for the tournament, Ronix decided to take part to show off his skills and possibly walk away as the victor of the tournament. He had a bit of an ego issue, it seemed, but as of the moment, that ego had dissipated as his breaths were coming short to his mouth. Such unnatural strength and agility for such a fat slob, he thought to himself. Ronix stood about 5 foot 7 inches and was fairly built for his size, mostly leg and arm muscle that defined the speed of his techniques. Dual-wielding daggers was with as much ease as if they were extensions of his arms. Ronix matched steel with steel against his opponent, trying to land strikes, but was often falling back to parrying and cross-parrying to avoid lethal strikes. The man was coming with intent to kill him, but Ronix was the only one who could tell at this point. Swish. A swing just missed his head, as he ducked underneath the man's sword arm and found the opening needed to end the battle. Unfortunately, he would lose the match as well, but it was a rather good compromise with his own life at stake. Ronix drove the daggers home into the chest cavity of the man, which caused blood to gush out from the twin wounds and stain his clothing, which were plain white but decorated with some sort of royal colors at the shoulders and abdomen, with the colors also running down the sides of his legs. His opponent fell face first into the ground as Ronix yanked his blades out and rolled away to avoid being crushed by the large man. Disqualified, announced the judge who was standing by, mouth agape at how the scene ended up. If anything, Ronix should have lost, many times over, but it appeared something caused the man to slip his guard. Unnaturally, too. It was as if it was forced, being controlled by some dark puppeteer in the shadows. Ronix, though, already knew the outcome of the battle and turned to leave the arena. Watching the battle end from arena stands, Crystal wore a smile at how well Ronix had done. He accomplished more than what she had thought he might have. The smile was brief, however, as Crystal looked through the crowd, trying to spot the man who had controlled the now dead fat man in the arena. To no avail, nothing came out of the crowd. Either was long-distance controlled magic, or the controller blended well with the crowd. Crystal turned her attention back to Ronix and started waving, calling out his name loudly. Ronix! Ronix's face bore a sullen look, slightly disappointed of the outcome of the early exit in the tournament. Hearing his name being hailed, Ronix pivoted slowly to check the crowd for whoever called out his name with so much familiarity. His eyes fell upon a woman waving frantically and smiling towards him. His expression turned into a mask of dread and disinterest mixed in. He immediately turned away from the woman he deemed crazy. Reeling over from a sudden explosion of tiny stars in his mind and eyes, and also from the pain now throbbing noticeably in the back of his head, Ronix grumbled and, as soon as he recovered, would turn to face the perpetrator. "The bloody hell was that for?" Ronix cried, rubbing the back of his head, feeling the newly pointed lump on the back of his head, before seeing the object in question was a shoe. "I thought you didn't wear shoes." "I don't," she replied easily enough, folding her arms across her chest. "More importantly, why did you just ignore me and start to walk away when I was calling out your name?" "Tisk. Well, 'cause the fact you probably rubbed the loss in my face," he explained while fiddling with his thumb, avoiding her glare so that he didn't even need to see to know that what was happening. Crystal's face seemed to ease, and look at him with a worried expression. Well, of course not. That man had strength and abilities that wouldn't even be normal for someone with a clear lack of physical conditioning. From his Woo-wee! This ought to be a good one! Can you feel it? The finals are going to be intense with those two in it. They easily dispatched the supposed toughest competitors here with ease. There were cries of excitement rising from the crowd as the two opponents were stepping into the arena from opposite sides of the floor. "Who are in the finals?" she asked sweetly, batting her eyelashes at the man. When he had turned around, originally he wore a grim face, and if looks could kill, she would have hit the floor. Seeing this kind of face, the man smiled and bowed his head while peering back at the arena for a moment, before pointing at a girl in the distance who was standing alone, but cheering for the two men in the arena apparently. "Her. I heard from a couple people that she knew them," he replied courteously, before going back to drinking the ale he had in his grubby hands. Nodding her thanks, Crystal, and Ronix in tow, began her way through the crowd to the girl who was smiling and cheering for them. Catching a glimpse of the two approaching her and giving her casual greetings and nods, she returned the greetings before Crystal started to ask. "I heard from a disgusting guy in the crowd over there," she flicked her thumb over her shoulder to the man that was burping while trying to cheer, "that you knew the two in the ring right now. May I ask who they are?" Ronix started at the beautiful girl before turning his eyes away from her and to the arena, for both wanting to check out the challenge and avoid the squinting glare of Hawkeye's that was boring into the side of his head, it seemed. "Well, certainly. Those two down there are..." The two men in the arena stood about 20 paces away from each other, but close enough to catch each other's glances. One of the men was holding a spear tightly against his forearm and pressed against his back as he pulled into a stance. He wore a smile that bore an overconfidence and cockiness. Raising his hand to run it through his blonde hair, the man continued to grin at his opponent. While the blonde-haired man was showing off his eagerness, the robe man, who seemed to lack pigments from the sun exposure, kept his posture rigid and his demeanor cool. Holding a book in his hand, he made a motion with the other, which brought out his other hand from the sleeve. He also smiled with somewhat overconfidence and eagerness. "Sign to Hugh and Matthias."